I have with me two ladies of considerable repute. Start with Sunita Kohli, who is, by profession, she's an interior designer, Padma Shri award winner. She's done fabulous work as a designer and an architect. And with all that, she has managed to find time to write not one, but two food books. And we have Ruth Prabhu DSouza, a journalist like me. And Ruth has compiled essays on the legendary restaurants of India as they appear in the Food Atlas of 2023. She just told me that, of course, in the 2024 list, some of the restaurants have changed. Still, the compilation of her essays are very, very nice, because I've always felt, as a foodie myself, I've always felt a dearth of a little, writing which goes a little deeper than mere nostalgia or just the recipes or, nice as they are. So what Ruth has done is she has compiled a list of restaurants, 7 restaurants as they appeared on the Food Atlas. And she, along with her fellow food writers, have written about some of India's most famous restaurants. And she wanted me to explain to you that, in her former gatherings, people were very, vociferous. They said, why have you not included this restaurant? Why have you not included that restaurant? So she says that it is not her choice per se. It has appeared in a list from which the 7 restaurants have been, in India, have been selected as legendary restaurants. So without much ado, we will start this conversation about food, and we will find out what it is which makes these beautiful ladies write with so much of passion, so much of insight, and so much of feeling about food. Sunita, maybe start with you. Can you tell us, Sunita's latest book has got a compilation of more than 200 recipes, which she has culled from her friends. And I sometimes wonder if these recipes came to you on WhatsApp, like we normally do, or how did you go about? What started the whole thing? What started the idea of putting together so many recipes?
Since your first question, is this audible? To answer your question first, your last question first, these recipes mostly came by WhatsApp. Some were mailed to me, some were flung at me, some I only received a photograph of from a copybook, and I was told to imagine the rest. Some were given to me verbally, and I was told to transcribe them, the last being a wonderful recipe for something called dhania chicken, which I got from a friend in Lahore. And Yusuf Salahuddin, he's very well known amongst cultural groups because he also does something called Virsa Heritage. And they have wonderful classical concerts. He lives in something called Barut Khana. He is the grandson of Iqbal, and so it naturally follows. And he serves legendary food. So when I had asked him 2 years ago, he said, Bilkul Sunita, Andruni Shehar ka main aapko bhejunga, meaning I'll send you from the old city. Well, that recipe from Andruni Shehar never came, and I'd send him a little WhatsApp message. And he said, Ari, I mean, it's coming, it's coming. So then last year I was in Lahore for the Lit Fest, and he had hosted a wonderful dinner. I said, Yusuf, now at least please give it to me. He said, you know what, go to my cook, and I will call her, it's a woman, with a beautiful face. She's been his cook for 30 years. And so we went aside into his dining room while this party was going on in his very famous courtyard. And so she tells me, and she said, I can only speak in Punjabi. So she says, Bibi, tusi bilkul fikar na karna. Meaning, Bibi, don't worry at all. because it's very easy. Then she gave me the recipe, which I came back to Delhi, and I have a Muslim, a long-suffering executive assistant. So he said, but ma'am, I can't understand Punjabi. He's from Lucknow also. I can't understand Punjabi. So I had to sit. I mean, it was such a long process. So to transcribe it, do that. Similarly, you know, Shabana Azmi, she sent me something, and she's a friend from before she got married. She sent me from, you know, you have these old copybooks, children's leftover copybooks, which you use for things. So I kept telling her, Shabana, then she sent me a photograph. Okay. And in the gutter line, I couldn't make out what exactly was written. She said, no, you're a cook, you'll understand, you know. So I said, no, Shabana, please. She says, you know, I'm actually in a shoot. So I've got friends who sent me recipes in all sorts of ways.
I think it must have been quicker to cook the dhania recipe than receive the recipe. How to make it, instructions from your friends.
I mean,
probably
no,
cook and consume it. I know. Talking of legendary food, talking about legendary food, and your book is about the legendary restaurants. I know, Ruth, that you have been part of many guilds, many award, many juries. So how did that happen? How did you become a part of those, juries where you sit down and you actually make a difference and vote and judge and pick and choose restaurants and so on?
So whether I've actually made a difference in the choice, I'm not really sure, but being a part of different award committees naturally happens when you've been writing about food in the media for around 17 years, like I've been doing now out of my 22-year career. So that's a natural part of it. That's how it's happened, yeah.
Incidentally, Ruth has, I came and shook her hands several times because she has interviewed my food heroes such as Marco Pierre White and of course the earlier Master Chef trio. So she has had the privilege of meeting them and talking to them and interviewing them and things like that. And talking about your book, so you call the legendary restaurants. So what, in the process of your compiling of these essays, what do you think made these restaurants legendary? You know, you have written a couple of essays there, and your other food writer friends have also done that. So what, in your opinion, makes these restaurants legendary?
So when we first conceived of the book, the entire idea was to, like Pankaja said, the restaurants that were chosen are part of the Taste Atlas list. This was based on the 2023 list. The 2024 list has just come out earlier in the month, and some of the restaurants have changed. So the idea was that each of the food writers who picked up these essays are people who have lived in that city, who have grown up with these restaurants, whose grandparents have taken them there, whose parents have taken them there. They're possibly taking their children there as well, weaving it into their personal narrative, and also interviewing all of the owners, getting the backstory. So that was the entire idea of putting the book together. And yes, what we did try to do was answer the question, what makes these restaurants legendary? Now, if you look at it from the technical point of view, a taste atlas would be more crowdsourced. So what is popularly seen on travel writing, on blogs, on your top 10 lists, most of the restaurants happen to feature there. But if you look within the country, a Peter Cat in Kolkata, an MTR in Bangalore, or a Kareem's and Amrik Sukhdev in Delhi side, all of these restaurants are 100 or possibly even older than that, or close to 100 years old. And they all started at a point when each of these cities were developing. So they've become a natural part of the story of each city. And people who used to go out and eat at that time, which is not the way we eat out today. There were very, very few places. Many places, in fact, if you look at Tunde Kababi, even the author of the essay, Anubhuti Krishna, she says that till the age of 25, she never even stepped into Tunde Kababi. It was her dad who would go pick it up. And there are even chefs today who says, like, let the girl stay at home, we will get the food for you and come. So that kind of a history still continues with a lot of places. Of course, it's changed with social media, and legendary status keeps changing with that as well. So I think a lot of the legendary part of it just comes because it's been a part of a generational story and has been handed down really well, which is I'm sure as you'll see in Sunita's book as well, a lot of recipes are oral tradition. I think in these restaurants, it's a oral heritage or a personal heritage that's passed down, and that's what makes them legendary.
And talking of legendary, talking of, Tunde Kebab, you are from Lucknow, and, your one entire book, the previous book which you wrote with your mother, which is, I think, so amazing that you managed to get together with your mother and write it. Would you like to tell us a little bit about how that came about? What was the experience of, were there arguments, were they sort of,
No, not at all. My mother was a legendary cook. And she had already written one book, which was published by Roli Books. And she'd gone to the publishers herself. She'd got the title herself, Continental Food for the, Continental Cuisine for the Indian Palate, which actually means Angrezi Khana, which actually means Anglo-Indian food. But I asked my mother, why did she keep, but she was doing it all herself at age 88. She got the publisher. Sadly, she passed away a couple of years ago at 96 and a half. And the half also has a history, I always have to say half, because when this book was when the Lucknow Cookbook was released in Calcutta, so, they set up a panel and there were two people I didn't know, and we were all mic'd up and everything, and then Dr. Pushpesh Pant, who was the moderator, told me that, he asked me a question and I said, yes, my mother who's 93. Mic'd up, she turns around and she tells me, no darling, I'm only 92 and a half. So, so that was important. Any case, my mother had written another cookbook after that, and again she'd found Bloomsbury, the publishers herself. Then this went into oblivion because something went with, I think he passed away or something, her commissioning editor. So I was very keen that this book of my mother's should be published before anything else. So I had gone to my publishers with whom I'm still working on this book on World Heritage Sites in India. And I just asked him, I said, do you know of another publisher? He immediately told me, he said, Sunita, we don't do cookbooks. I said, no, I'm not asking you if you would publish, but publishers know other publishers. Any case, he said, let me think about it for 2 days. And he came back and told me, we will publish the book if you co-author it with your mother, and if you write a 10,000 word essay on your parents' story and a note about the book. And we don't want 345 recipes, which my mother had done for her other book. We only want 150. So I thought, how easy is this? From 345, I will abstract 150 recipes. And how easy is that? Because the subject I studied was literature, so I'm English, BA, Masters, incomplete PhD on Christopher Marlowe, and then who became a designer. That's another story altogether, So it became the most difficult 3 months of my life because my mother pulled out, without exaggeration, another 1,000 recipes to be considered. And then, to get my parents' story has to come from her and what my father had been saying. And then when you start writing personal histories, and particularly a history of displacement, because my parents come from undivided India, or what is there then. I was born in Lahore at the time of independence. My mother comes from Quetta. My father is a Rajput whose family had migrated and became naturalized Lahoris. And so the whole family is from that side. And so these stories of displacement, but I didn't want this book to carry any of that, because Lucknow was a very accepting society. Earlier I was listening to Shashi Tharoor and he was talking about inclusivity. Inclusivity as a notion as a concept has always existed in Lucknow, in Awadh, as it does in other places in India also, called Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb, which does not mean just the physical manifestation of it, which is using gold and silver together, like you would use in silver vessels, with silver and then with gold gilding, or seldom actual gold, or with the kamkhwabs that used to be woven in the great brocade centers of Varanasi and of Lucknow. So, but it means the easy acceptance of each other's thoughts and belief systems. And that is what Lucknow had. And therefore, the recipes in this book actually is not about Awadhi food, the rich Awadhi food that we associate Awadh with, but it's to do with everyday food. And that came from the several communities who had made Lucknow their home. So, if that answers your question.
Yes. I mean, and we could just go on. There is so much. Food is such a unifying factor. Of course, in many places it also divides, but basically it is something that brings people together. And you spoke of displacement, and in a conversation with Ruth this morning, she told me this lovely anecdote, which I'm going to ask her to repeat about. She was in Kuwait when the invasion happened, and they had to live in a refugee camp, and how her memories of food there, what the memories of food were, and how it differed so much from the way her mother remembers it, since you were talking about your mother and yourself. Ruth, would you share your whole...
Absolutely. That conversation actually just started out of the blue at breakfast this morning. So in 1990, August 2nd, Kuwait was invaded by Iraq. I was 12 years old at that time. I was born, and till the age of 12, I was there. That's when we came back to India. And it was organized by the Indian government, so there was an actual escape route we had to take. It's a convoy of 52 buses filled with people. You could book the entire bus for yourselves and your family and friends, and that's what we had done. The reason I remember all of this, by the way, so clearly, even though I was only 12 years old, is because my dad had asked me to maintain a diary and said, you are going to be part of history now. This is something that none of us have been through, so just maintain a diary. It'll also keep you occupied. I was one who used to bounce off walls at that time. And so we started a journey that began in Kuwait. We drove the breadth of Iraq and ended up in Jordan, where we had to stay in no man's land between Iraq and Jordan for 5 days in a camp. And that camp was, at one point, had around 1.2 million Indian refugees staying there, waiting for evacuation, which would happen through Jordan. And the Red Cross and a lot of other aid agencies were working to provide people with food. So every tent that was allotted could accommodate 30 people. And each tent was given a gas stove, a box of tinned sardines in oil, your basic onions, tomatoes, potatoes, and milk for all the children. That's the rations for the day. And if you wanted, you could stand in line for the other agencies who were doling out aid every day, and you'd get a cup of curd, or you'd get some tomatoes, and you can add it to your stash and cook. Now, what made it, to me, as a 12-year-old, I did not understand the gravity of the situation we were in. To me, I was with friends and family, and we were taking a road trip. Now, when I look at it and when I read about those stories back then, I see it through the eyes of my mother. I see it as a mother myself now and wonder what I would have felt back then. But to me, it was an adventure, which was made great because we also had a cook who was on the bus with us, and he was quite the ingenious fellow. So every day, there'd be sets of tents that would clear out because they were taken by bus to Jordan Airport and they would leave. Now, when you leave the tent, someone or the other would leave behind a can of condensed milk, or they'd leave a bag of chocolates, or they'd leave some grocery item that they happened to bring with them. Our man would leave at like 5 in the morning to see which tent is empty. He would forage whatever he could. So I remember camp meals being lentil rice with sardines and tomato sauce, because he presented to all of us that way. And one day we even had caramel custard because he managed to get that can of condensed milk. And we had eggs, which he managed to get another day. And then he did a coffee flavored dessert the other day. And I remember all of this really, really clearly, which I think is a very different way for me to remember it. Whereas my mother could only remember it as how cold it was. It was -3 in the desert at that time. And how do we keep the children warm? And can we light a fire? And are we going to be bombed on the way to the airport? It was stuff like that. So yeah, that's the story.
Food has got this amazing ability to bring back memories, you know. And sitting here, when I think back, I know that much of those memories is probably a figment of my imagination, but there is a kernel of, you know, something which must have happened which triggered off those thoughts and, you know, those emotions and things like that. And talking about your experience in Kuwait and in Jordan, I was telling you about this person who's written this fabulous 2 books called Zaitun and Ripe Figs. And she's a journalist, and she goes to these refugee camps where people have barely anything. And yet, in that place and time of nothing, you know, they are holding together to their food legacies and trying to see if they can recreate food which they ate back home. So it's you know, it's very moving. It can be very emotional. It is much more than just a, you know, recipe or something like that. Sunita ji, you were telling me that there was a particular phrase from Lawrence Durrell, was it, which you wanted to read out from, you know, about food from your earlier book, perhaps.
With your permission, if I may, I'll just add to. This is a very moving story, actually, Ruth. It really is. And in my mother's case, and I guess also my father's, since they all came through partition, is that, you know, there's a partition syndrome. So that would never allow anyone to waste anything. So I remember up in our home in Mussoorie, being cold, I mean, hot jalebis would be bought for tea time. And then jalebis would invariably be left over. So the next day, my mother, who was a very inventive cook and always was, she would kind of, you know, beat it up, add milk, add eggs, and it would turn into the most delicious dessert called jalebi pudding, which is in this cookbook, so is in the Lucknow cookbook. And similarly, I mean, there are friends sitting from South India here, and I've told them this story. I mean, sitting with my mother having morning tea or something, and then I said, but where is this tea cozy from? I mean, she belonged to the generation that still used tea cozies. And she said, she was a bit uncomfortable, and she says, oh, I don't remember. I said, Mama, you absolutely remember, because that suspiciously looks like a kurta I had when I was 15 years old. You see, so nothing ever got wasted. It was always used. And speaking about memories, there is in this cookbook, which has only been illustrated with a few utensils, but probably the most in the introduction, there is an illustration of a pierced spatula. And the reason why I chose it as the most important illustration is because my mother's mother, who came from Multan, got married in Quetta, carried this, what we call a pony, with her, of which she would make malpuras, and carried it with her to Quetta. And when they had to leave Quetta, she carried it back via Lahore to Delhi, then to Rajpur, till eventually they settled in Delhi, and then gave it to my mother. So this pony, which must be now 100 years old, came to my mother. So what makes it so important that you carry when you are carrying nothing with you? Because they came in, there's a story that is there, which I've heard many times, is that when all these atrocities started to happen, my maternal uncles, they managed to they managed to charter a plane that went to Quetta. And my grandfather made the decision that nobody would carry anything with them, but they would try and take with them as many people as possible. So an aunt of mine who lived later in New York and died there, she always told me, she said, we left Lahore as rich Indians and have arrived here with nothing. So, you know, there are those many stories, and rather than the Lawrence title, may I read something else which has a lot of meaning for me, since the recipes are also stories of partition, of, I guess, deprivation, though they would never let us know. So David Lowenthal, the American historian renowned for his work on heritage and spatial concepts of the past and the future, had famously pronounced that the past is a foreign country. This cookbook, although palpable with nostalgia, selectively recaptures events and objects from the past that are a part of the intangible heritage of food and familial memories of gentler times. These are collective memories that conserve a sense of continuity, of belonging, and of being rooted. I believe food engenders social and family harmony. It anchors us, as I said, to the past and makes us rooted. Our personal histories define us, and I have chosen to do it through this cookbook with recipes that were learned from my mother and she had learned from her mother. And I end by saying one can certainly cook from this book, but one can also read through these recipes to get a glimpse of Lucknowi culture and of the lives behind these recipes. This is a book for cooks and for armchair cooks, because for people who really love food, it is a lens through which to view this particular world. So, you know, there is so much that is written on food because, you know, people describe food and cuisine as alchemy. I mean, that's a cliched word because you take ingredients and you change something like an alchemist. You make something totally different out of it. And the India Cookbook, from the tables of my friends, I have to say, has recipes from many, many friends who are, some who are present here, and many, many friends from Chennai. So I've been fortunate that I had recipes that were given to me from North, South, East, West, Central India, and also subcontinental India.
No, that is amazing. I mean, that is the magic of food, isn't it? You know, for each one of us, it resonates in a different way and usually brings a smile to our lips. And, you know, we like that. We love going out. We love eating out. We love discussing restaurants. And what I liked about the collection of essays, Ruth, in your compilation, many of them, you know, like the Amrik Singh, the dhaba, you know, or Tunde Kebab, or Peter Cat. Peter Cat, of course, is sort of, you know, hip and happening from Calcutta. But, you know, that Amrik one is wonderful because that is the place where long distance, long haul lorry drivers used to come and look for a hot meal. And that continues today, though it's become very famous and things like that. So would you like to tell us a little bit more about how most of these restaurants which are featured in your collection, they all come from a place of nurturing? I mean, other than the economy of it all comes from a place of nurturing, feeding people who needed it. And, you know.
So if you read the essays, you'll also see that besides the nurturing part, all of these restaurants largely started because people came to another place seeking their fortunes. And food was the only way that they could do it. If you look at the MTR story, the original founders of MTR came from a very small village. And they were working as cooks in houses in Bangalore. And it was one judge in Bangalore who decided, listen, you have the potential, I'll give you the seed money, start your restaurant. And today that restaurant is MTR. Someone took a chance on somebody. Amrik Sukhdev started primarily because two cousins were adopted by an uncle, and the uncle already had the dhaba. and there was a spat between the two cousins. And so he was sent to what is today Amrik Sukhdev and was told, you started off in this place. And he built it up from scratch. And the brilliant part about the entire thing, they've been through it all. They were obviously pre-partition. They went through a time when there was a fire that brought the entire place down. They were also brought down because they were completely demolished. There was no legalities at that point. And when the government realized, let's tax these guys, they're doing great business, legalities came in. They were completely bulldozed, not once but twice. But they've lived through all of that, and they started Amrik Sukhdev started a makeshift under a tarpaulin to continue feeding people, because their main aim is, never mind if the restaurant's burning at the back, but we still have to feed people. And that was the main idea behind all of it. Peter Cat was evolving at a time when the Calcutta scene was lively, bright. It was about cabaret in the true sense of the term, music and everything. And then communism comes and takes over in terms of governance, and everything changes. And that entire evolution is seen in the story of Peter Cat, and how it evolved still continues to maintain all of that old charm. Ram Ashraya in Bombay, if you look at it, or even Paragon in Kerala, they have grown up from the grassroots. Ram Ashraya was to cater to a very coastal crowd that was coming in, a huge Udupi crowd that was coming into Bombay to seek their fortunes yet again. Someone had to feed them home food from their homes. The same thing with Paragon. It was a family-run business which was almost run to the ground when the patriarch passed away. It's the son who had awakening of conscience, because if you read the book, you'll also hear that Sumesh, the owner of Paragon, says that when my mother was going through widowhood and being the only woman at the till at a time when Kerala society wouldn't accept something like that, I just added to her problems. I was that teenager. I couldn't care less. But one day, crisis of conscience, and he says, I need to pick this up. And he catalyzes the entire thing, and today Paragon is what it is. A lot of it is seeking your fortunes and building something that you're passionate about. And it's not just about name and fame. It's about creating a product that people will continue to love through the generations. That's what's come out for me.
I think we have a lot of restaurants like that in India. A lot of places where, to eat, which, where our fathers have said, oh, I used to go there, I used to eat there as a student, or, I went there then with my friends and I watched so-and-so singing, Trinkas and Usha Uttob. I remember I was there. I was actually there when she had her first, she sang at Trinkas in Calcutta. And so that's the way it is. Now, just on a lighter note, Sunita ji, do you cook? Do you enjoy cooking? I mean,
I love to cook.
Yeah.
I can't say that I cook every day.
Okay.
But I enjoy the process of cooking. And now, of course, it's one also knows how to instruct. We have an old cook of 30 years, but how to instruct him what to put in. Because, like architecture, where really architecture, how architects and designers work, it's a concept which is in one's inner eye. Similarly with food, if you add one spice, you can it's a very visual thing. You can visualize what will happen to the zaika of that dish, or how it will change in color. So all that kind of, I guess these are inherited things from my mother, grandmothers, so.
That's so nice, because I was talking to Sunita this morning and I was asking her, how does architecture and design play into, your passion for food? So she said, as a designer, I always have the end, I visualize what this is going to look like. And cooking food for me is very much like that. How the...
No, that question I get asked often, but how come you've done a cookbook? When you're a designer and you're known for doing essays on design or architecture. And I said, why not? I mean, we can't all be defined within silos of a particular practice or what we do. There's so many facets to everybody. So this is, of course, I guess, another facet to the fact that I'm also an interior designer. And but the thing that surprises me is the other day at Hyderabad airport, not the other day, a couple of months ago, somebody came running up to me, 3 girls, and they said, "Aren't you Sunita Kohli who wrote the Lucknow Cookbook?" I thought to myself, "Arey wah." Earlier they would always say, "Aren't you Sunita Kohli who's the interior designer?" But you know, so yeah. So that's what food is.
Ruth, do you cook?
I love to cook.
You love to cook?
I love to cook.
What do you like to cook the most?
Okay, so my family is a mixed background family. I'm a Mangalorean Catholic married to a Kerala-based GSP community, and we eat everything under the sun. And I have a family that loves to eat, and I'm someone who loves to cook. And currently what we're doing, and we love to experiment a lot as well. So currently what we're doing is cooking our way through all the states of India. So what we do is every Sunday, we decide what we like, the vegetables that we like, or the meats that we like, or the seafood we like, and pick a state and cook it according to that state, and have an entire thali out there. So I think that's a fun way of doing it. And I'm happy that I have a husband and a daughter who totally love to cook themselves. We've also divided the week between us. And so 2 days it's my responsibility, 2 days it's the husband, and 2 days it's the daughter. And also my mother who's now living with us. So cooking's a part of our lives, no matter what. And I have a daughter who is, by the way, answering her pre-boards right now. And the other day at 9:30 in the night, she comes out and says, "Tomorrow is psychology exam. I'm really nervous. I'm going to bake chocolate chip cookies." And at 10:15, we had chocolate chip cookies in the night because my daughter is nervous. So that's the kind of family we are.
That's one sorted family, I can say that. I can say that. So do you have a lot of recipe books? Do you have favorite recipe books?
I do have a lot of recipe books, but I'm also, my mother's written a recipe book on Mangalorean Catholic food as well.
Oh.
It's a self-published book. So I refer to that a lot for our home food. But I'm also the person who, after having cooked out of books, I know what ingredients I have. I will randomly look at recipes and put it together myself. If I'm not doing, say, something like the food of different states, if it's just everyday cooking. Food of states, I do refer to books or, you know, to people whom I know and get the recipes out of them.
That's absolutely wonderful, I think. Do you have a lot? You said your mother had a whole collection of recipe books.
I mean, she has, which I have to do something with, recipe books. And also you asked me earlier about Lawrence Durrell. And the earliest novel based on cuisine is called The Passionate Epicure, and it came out in 1924, which was in my mother's cookbook library. And in that, the preface is by the great Lawrence Durrell, where the one who wrote the Alexandrian Quartet, etc., where he describes cuisine literally as, and the writing of recipes as word paintings. So, and that's a very powerful thing. Then he goes on to describe it further. And so I think since we are being taking off from what you had said about that your husband, your mother, everybody, in our family, everybody cooks. And my husband, also, late husband rather, also has a recipe in this and he was the best cook in the family. But he had a different way of cooking, you see, because at the end of it, maybe the cook wanted to resign because, you know, so, but we've all cooked, and certainly something that COVID did for us, I think for every family across the countries, that we experimented more and more with food. And I know that my granddaughter, who was already a good baker, became an excellent baker. My daughter, who was already a good cook, but for the first time started cooking Indian food, which she hadn't done earlier. She would do Thai and, you know, Italian and all that. So I think families that cook together also stay together. And having said that, you know, my husband used to, in the early years of our marriage, in my parents' home in Mussoorie, discuss recipes with my mother. you know, after breakfast. They would be talking about food and recipes and criticizing me in between also, you know. So eventually I said, listen, Rome, who is it that discusses recipes with their mothers-in-law? Please think about that, you know. So.
Oh, no, but that's so nice. That's so nice to hear. Sadly, in my house, everyone eats. I'm, you know, including me, but I'm the one who cooks. You know, one could go on. There's so many. In fact, I wanted to ask them that we have all spoken of all nice things. You must tell me about one major kitchen disaster you've had, but I don't think we have the time for it. Quickly, okay. One major kitchen disaster.
Mine is actually a legendary one. It's in the sense it goes with the book as well. This was in my initial years as a new bride who was learning to cook, and my husband was the willing bakra in between. We decided to go for a movie one afternoon, and I said, I'll finish the cooking and then we'll head out. So I put rice in the pressure cooker. It did the 3 whistles and I turned it off, and we went for the movie. The movie is Lakshay, by the way, Hrithik Roshan's. I don't know why I remember that. And 3.5 hours later, we come back home and my entire kitchen is smelling of burnt metal. So what I did is, instead of turning the pressure cooker off, I put it on simmer. And it decided to burn my entire pressure cooker, the rice. And that was the worst thing that could ever happen. You can imagine the smell. So, but we did manage to redeem that pressure cooker. We had some great guys who could redeem that pressure cooker. And it lived with me for another 10 years at least after that. That was my kitchen disaster.
I think mine was the first, and since I learned a lesson, never try and make a meal to impress anybody else. The first meal that I cooked for my parents-in-law, I did all the cooking myself, the chopping, everything, and I decided to do something that I've cooked many times before in our own home in Lucknow. It was a dish called chicken a la scala, learned from my mother, because in Lucknow there used to be Anglo-Indian food, but which also had quite a lot of influence of the French, because the French were also there. Any case, so I decided to make this, but since it was going to be my parents-in-law and my brothers-in-law and sisters-in-law, so instead of 1 chicken, I was going to make it with 4 chickens. And then I found that everything was floating in butter. So in those days, there were no cell phones, so I rang up my mother. I had to book a call and everything in Lucknow from Delhi. And I said, this is the disaster. I mean, it's just, everything is just butter. What's happened? So she tells me, she said, but you should have known, when you double and triplicate and quadruplicate the recipe, you don't do that with the butter also. Any case, that was one disaster. Second thing, I made brownies, because I was going to do brownies and homemade ice cream. Ice cream was fine. And us zamane mein, we used to have, there was a black tin, which was the oven. And you put your hand in to see whether it was hot enough or not. So, all of that. So I made the brownies. I mean, brownies which I must have made 100 times before. And incidentally, my mother was that sort of inventive cook that she taught us the gooeyest brownies. And that was not to put the recipes in the Indian Cookbook, not to use butter, but to use peanut oil. Any case, the brownies burnt from the bottom. So when my husband returned from work, I was almost in tears, because this great meal I was going to cook for his parents and his brothers and things was going to be a major disaster. So my husband just cut, any case, he salvaged the brownies.
Wow, that is the only story I can say is I wanted to impress my Air Force husband with what we call English food in the Air Force, which is basically anything which doesn't have garam masala. So I made Russian salad, which was all the rage. I mean, you know, if you made Russian salad, and Raju comes home and says, oh, avial is lovely. So, you know, so now I tell him what I have cooked, you know. So thank you. Yeah, if anyone has any questions to ask these lovely ladies, please do. Yes.
Okay, I would say it's all of the above. The owner needs to know what he's talking about when he invests his money in it. There has to be a very sound business plan as well. And I think one point that you've missed in the entire thing is to actually judge your audience. What happens with most restaurants today is if one restaurant is successful in a city, you will find at least 10 copycats of it because that's a formula they think that will work. Where it is placed, who is the audience you're catering to, what are the price points you're putting, there are many, many factors that go in it. I think a lot of people get into the business of restaurants to make a quick turnaround of money and get out of it, and not really from let's make the food great, let's make the experience great. So even if you look at the COVID times, the restaurants that managed to survive are the ones who actually looked at the audience that they were dealing with and not really just the numbers. They pivoted very fast. So I'd say it's all of what you said, plus knowing your audience and a touch of luck as well.
Here, I would like to tell one thing. My grandmother was a very great cook. She must be in the pre-independence era. So she was also educated. She used to pass on certain recipe to the family and across the community also. And one thing she used to tell, that in the estate, the Britishers grow a milk worm. They pour milk in the, that is stone vessel. Daily they used to pour more. So it will grow up to 3 inches. And then they will cook it. Whether such a recipe is everywhere. I am searching for it. She told very authentically, she was living in the estate. The Britishers were the manager. My grandfather was the manager, grandfather's father. So such a thing, whether you find it in any literature, I want to throw it to the audience. I have not heard about it afterwards.
I think if any of us finds it, we will find you, ma'am. Yeah.
Hi, I have a question. Hello. Hello.
Hi.
There are specific foods like biryani from a Muslim wedding, koel tair sadam, and you of course talked about your mother's jalebi pudding. So, what are your thoughts on specific food and specific tastes, especially that the experience that you get from food, which transcends beyond just the taste or ingredients, but more to the mind?
More to the brain. I've never frankly thought about it. Food that is good for the brain, excepting of course the mandatory almonds that we still eat every single day, which is supposed to be good for brain power. But food is one of the things you asked me earlier, in which food is one of those things which also changes as it goes along, because food is not food like culture. I mean, food is a very important manifestation of culture and of civilization. And food also changes, like food that came along the Silk Route or the spice routes, because these routes were not just carrying trade, but they were also carrying art and ideas and cuisine. So there's so much that changed. I mean, I can say for Lucknow, the fact that pomegranate is used there has come from Afghanistan. It's all part of that migration that took place of art and ideas. So I'm sorry, I don't know about, I guess good food is good for the brain. Like I also find that good food has a great sensuous quality about it.
Sunita.
Yes.
Sunita, I just wanted to,
Yeah.
I just wanted to tell you that I am also from Lucknow and I've lived there for 30 years. My husband was working there in the civil service.
Yes.
And we know Ram Advani and Mrs. Manglik and Noor Khan and all the people who are there, and all wonderful cooks.
All wonderful.
And the great thing about the Lucknow women, which are all working women there, that Julia was another good friend of mine who used to teach in the IT college. She used to have her Christmas, everybody visited her for Christmas, and she would make Christmas cake, and then her husband, they would have wine.
Then for Eid, we
Ma'am,
would...
do you have a question? If you could just come
No.
to the question, please.
I have no question.
Or you have no question because there's someone waiting to, yeah.
I'm Sunita's friend.
I just
Or
wanted to
she's
tell her.
my friend, whichever way you want to look at it.
I
I have a
wanted to tell
question.
her about
I
the-
bought your book, Sunita, yesterday and had you sign it, remember? I went
Yes.
home and went through the whole book
Oh.
and read the first part of it and then the recipes. And I was a bit disappointed in the sense that I'm a Sindhi and you have only 2 recipes from Sindh, and I was also one of the people like you who had to move to India during partition as a young kid. So how is it that you don't have, except Shireen's recipe, you don't have any other Sindhi recipe? Now
you
that
know-
we are also part of India.
Of course, absolutely. And in fact, I hope in early May I'm going to be traveling in Sindh to see World Heritage Sites there, Makli Tomb and Mohenjo-daro and all of that. No, it's, you know, it's, the 2 Sindhi recipes are in this book. And one has always had great Sindhi khana, not only in this friend's home called Shireen Paul. They have the Park Hotel
the Park
here.
Hotel, yeah.
But she would also send it home. So, in fact, they could have, because they have a hotel, they could have sent any recipe. But I specifically asked Shireen to send me the
Sindhi curry.
Sindhi curry, which I absolutely love. So there wasn't anything about, you know, that many ethnicities have to be recognized, but just, it was all based on friends. Next book.
Hi.
Next book, yes.
can I-
Thank you.
I find writing books extremely difficult. I mean, I'm in it, and I have actually 4 books which will come out between the end of this year and early next year. I find designing much, much easier. I can with one eye closed, I can design. I
Hi.
can't do that with writing.
Hi, hi. I'm at the back. Can I ask? Yes. My dad is an amazing cook. So I just wanted to ask you guys, like, your male counterparts who were amazing cooks. So if you can share us one story that could inspire us to be better cooks and more males can take up cooking responsibility.
At least in my book, I'll quickly say, my book, there are many men who've also contributed recipes. One being the person who runs the Lahore Literary Festival, Razi Ahmad, and his origins are from Bihar. So he's given a wonderful recipe of Bihari aloo and Bihari kebabs. So, I mean, I never do gender discrimination, whether it's design, architecture, or food. Would you like to answer?
Yeah, the way I look at it is before you can inspire any man to cook, the first idea is they should understand that cooking is for everybody. It's a life skill and it's not a task that is supposed to be done. So I think the best way to do it is find out what is the favorite dish of that man made by a woman or anyone other member of the family and stop making it and tell them to learn to do it yourself. And that possibly can inspire them.
We have one last question, please.
Hello? Yeah. So just to add to the restaurant thing, I would like to know from all of y'all that when you're looking at the restaurant, do you look at like a restaurant that serves all the thing, like a multi-cuisine restaurant, or a standalone restaurant which concentrates on one cuisine? And now we have a restaurant in Chennai which serves, it has no definition of a particular cuisine. It serves cuisines from all parts of the world, and maybe their famous recipe or whatever it is, or their particular dish which is famous. So how would you judge, or how would you walk into a restaurant that,
I don't think there can be comparisons made as such unless you are comparing a restaurant within the same genre together. I'd compare Japanese and Korean and Korean. But I can't compare a Korean to a multi-cuisine.
No, what I'm saying is, like, would you walk into a restaurant that serves you multi-cuisine?
Absolutely.
Or
Everyone deserves a chance. Everyone's serving
Right.
food. Everyone's put in the work, the passion.
Right.
It works for some, it doesn't work for the others. So there is no dissing or saying that is not really cool because they're not focusing on a single cuisine or they are cuisine agnostic, so they must be doing something great.
Right.
It doesn't work that way, yeah. So it's open to everyone.
But you know, to carry on with, if for instance, if we are doing a lunch or a dinner at home, I will always make it a single cuisine meal. And so there's a concentrated flavor of what one is serving. So one will never mix Italian with Indian and, you know, Indian with Thai, etc. But that's a personal choice. And I think that both work, but I think standalone restaurants that concentrate on one cuisine really become, you know, there's a speciality about them. And I hope there are going to be many more restaurants in India that serve regional cuisine, because I think our regional cuisine is so absolutely fantastic.
No, I absolutely agree on the single cuisine restaurants or the standalone restaurants. It's just that we should look at each one of them, but look at them in their genre as well. Not, look at a standalone for being a standalone and the work they're doing. Look at a multi-cuisine for the work that they are doing.
No, like for example, just quickly, just 1 second. Like for example, I know. For example, if you're going to say Lucknow and you have Avdi food there, a particular, but we don't have that in all regions of India. You go there, you'll get the same Chinese and the Indian and this thing. But if you're going to a particular place and they're serving their ethnic food, I mean,
that's your choice. I mean, you make a choice. You don't go there if you feel strongly against it. No, I mean, I'm just saying. Even I sometimes say, oh God, everything they've got under the sun. But it's a matter of choice and it's a matter of, okay? Thank you so much. Thank you. It's been a wonderful,
Thank you.
nice talking to you. Bye-bye. Bye.